Welcome to Dadograms. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and I created Dadograms to help all of you learn how to win in life. And today, I'm certainly going to do that. But I'm betting this is probably going to rub a lot of you the wrong way. Because I need to be blunt. Because what's happening right now isn't just foolish, it's downright dangerous. Florida, where I'm living right now, is talking about eliminating vaccine requirements for kids in schools. If that happens, Florida would become the first state in the union to drop or at least relax vaccine mandates. And some people are cheering this on as a victory for freedom. But here's the truth. This isn't freedom. It's recklessness. And it puts all of us, our families and our kids and our communities, at risk. Now the usual disclaimer, I'm not a healthcare professional and this video is meant for educational purposes and not medical advice. But I'm one of those rare individuals out there who knows what life without vaccines looks like, especially from some of the really nasty diseases out there. My great aunt Nancy caught polio as a little girl when she was only 4 years old. She was paralyzed from the waist down for the rest of her life. She never walked again. She lived her entire life in a wheelchair and would tell us kids in her 80s that she could still remember the sensation of running through the grass as a little girl before polio. She got that disease not because of bad choices, not because of some accident, but because she was a child in a world where vaccines for really dangerous diseases hadn't even been invented yet. Horrible things like that were commonplace before vaccines. Polio crippled or killed children. Smallpox, the single deadliest and most prolific killer in human history, scarred and killed millions. Parents buried their kids from diseases that we now barely even think about. And this was not ancient history. This is all recent. Smallpox was only finally eradicated in 1980. I was 8 then. And polio and most of the other diseases we don't get anymore, they're still here, waiting to come back. Vaccines don't just prevent some inconvenient illness, they prevent death or lifelong suffering. In a world where we can only seem to think about ourselves in the here and now, when it comes to vaccines, that's exactly the kind of thinking that will get people killed. Vaccines aren't just about protecting you, they're about protecting all of us together. There's a principle called herd immunity. If enough people are vaccinated, around 90 to 95% of the population, then diseases can't spread easily. Even those who can't be vaccinated, like newborns and people with immune disorders, are protected because the disease has nowhere to go. When you skip vaccines or refuse to let your children be vaccinated, you're not just making a personal choice. You're making a choice that weakens the entire community. You're punching holes in the protective shield that protects the most vulnerable among us. And diseases are ruthless. They don't care about your politics or your opinions. They don't negotiate. You can't take them to court and accuse them of violating your rights. They spread wherever there is weakness, and they sicken, they maim, and they kill. Your choices affect others, especially when it comes to contagious diseases. And if you're a parent making these decisions about your children who are too young to make their own choices, I believe you're negligent in denying them a vaccine. Now wait. Don't go getting all riled up and pissed off at that accusation. If your children cannot safely take a vaccine, that's one thing. But if you're a parent whose children are able to take that vaccine, and if you refuse that for them, then I am speaking truth. I think you're being negligent in your responsibility to your child and your community, period. You know, back in the day, back before the polio vaccine, tens of thousands of kids were paralyzed or killed each and every year in the U.S. Before smallpox was eradicated, hundreds of millions of people died worldwide. And take a look at the damage done if they actually survived. It was hellish. The only reason we don't see those diseases today is because vaccines work. They killed smallpox, eradicated. It's gone for good. So you don't have to take that vaccine. But the other diseases you don't fear anymore, the vaccines are simply protecting you, but those diseases are still there. You see, entire generations have grown up healthy because parents line them up in schools and clinics for shots. And most of us haven't known the fear, the pain, or the suffering due to those diseases. And trust me, you don't want to know. None of us do. That's why we need to keep taking the vaccines, to keep those diseases away. And sure, like any medical intervention, vaccines carry some risks, but they are extremely rare. For example, With the modern inactive polio vaccine we use here in the United States, I can't actually find any data anywhere that suggests we've even had one adverse reaction. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that there was at least one in all of its history. Counter that with the tens of thousands of children in the U.S. that were paralyzed or killed by polio every single year before the vaccine, it seems more than worth it. A rare complication will always be tragic for the individual and their family, but measured against the millions of lives saved, vaccines are one of humanity's greatest victories. Imagine turning back the clock. Imagine sending your kids into schools where measles, whooping cough, and polio could spread again. That's what we're flirting with when we drop mandates, and we're already seeing the very minor beginnings of it right now. We've seen the first measles deaths in the U.S. in years, starting in Texas, and just a few days ago they announced on the news that there was a measles-related death in California. Why? Because vaccination rates in some communities have dropped below the safe 95% threshold. Measles is one of the most contagious viruses on Earth. If one person has it, up to 90% of all the unvaccinated people around them will catch it. These diseases lately were preventable, but because some folks were selfishly choosing not to get vaccines, herd immunity is breaking down and people are dying, and it will likely get worse. Then there's been a whooping cough resurgence. It's happening in those states again with declining childhood vaccinations. Whooping cough is especially deadly for infants too young to be vaccinated themselves. In places where vaccination rates dipped, hospitals filled with coughing children fighting for air, a disease most parents today had never even seen before. This is a clear sign that things are going the wrong way. But ladies and gentlemen, we are about to cross the Rubicon. A few weeks ago at a press conference, Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo vowed to end vaccine mandates in the state, even for children, announcing plans to wipe all of them away, every last one of them, off the books. He even claimed that vaccine mandates dripped of disdain and slavery. Consider what Dr. Ladapo said. He's a state physician, sworn to do no harm. You know, the Hippocratic Oath? So here he is, standing in front of cameras, effectively signing a blank check for deadly outbreaks. That isn't medical leadership, folks. That's betrayal. And if he makes any progress on stopping mandatory vaccines, it may very well be the eventual death of your loved ones, even entire communities. Thank God most folks understand just how deranged he seemed. Public health experts begin to sound the alarm. Pediatricians, infectious disease specialists, and the American Medical Association are pushing back, warning his unhinged effort could undo all the progress vaccines have built and literally put kids' lives on the line. And we also have R.F. Kennedy acting as the Secretary of Health and Human Services and his Make America Healthy Again campaign that has so confused the debate on vaccines that many are wondering what the hell to do. Take a vaccine, don't take a vaccine. It's confusing as all get out. Now folks, I worked closely with 4-star admirals while in the Navy, and they often spoke about the dangers of creating uncertainty. It's well known that from uncertainty stems chaos, confusion, and when confused, people just stop doing the things they'd always done, the things that had allowed them, well, to win in life, like take the vaccines. Uncertainty only makes it easier for a small minority to stop taking vaccines and to let their loud and boisterous voices drown out the calm and rational voices of the majority. Do any of you really want this to happen? Do you want to give disease a chance to come after your children? Do you want to be holding the hand of your child as they are shaking and sweating from fever and literally dying in front of you? It's a reality many of you could face, so be careful what you allow to happen. Now let's zoom out a bit. Let's zoom out to the 50,000 foot view. Charles Darwin taught us that in nature, survival goes to the fittest. Not the strongest, but the best adapted. The strong are those who find ways to survive risks and maximize opportunities to pass on their genes. The weak are those who don't. And over time, they just kind of fade away. When a community abandons proven protections like vaccines, it's choosing weakness. It's essentially saying, let the strong survive, and the weak, like my unvaccinated children, well, they can die. Folks, that's not progress. That's regression. It's medieval, and that's just flat out irresponsible. And if you think I'm being dramatic, consider this. History is full of civilizations undone not by armies, but by diseases. The Black Death reshaped Europe. Smallpox wiped out the indigenous population of the Americas. Disease can and will exploit any opening we give it, and it will kill. Survival of the fittest means adaptation, and adaptation is taking the vaccine. Ignoring science is not adaptation. It's surrender. It's weakness. First, it's mental weakness for not seeing and embracing the benefits that are there for the taking. Second, it's physical weakness because you're vulnerable to a disease that you could have been protected from. I'm sure some of you have probably heard of the Darwin Awards, a tongue-in-cheek prize given to people who die or remove themselves from the gene pool through unbelievably stupid decisions. Well, here's the hard truth, folks. Parents who refuse vaccines for their kids are turning their families into Darwin Award candidates. They are willingly re-entering a lottery that past generations fought desperately to escape, and they're dragging the rest of us into that lottery with them. That may sound harsh, but it's reality. When you ignore immunity, you're not just risking yourself, you're putting at risk the newborn in the hospital nursery, the kid battling leukemia, the elderly neighbor down the street. All for what? Your misunderstanding of the science and your belief that your rights are more important than that of everyone else around you combined? So where does this leave us? Well, we can just kind of shrug and say, well, I don't have a voice strong enough to push back government policy. It's a growing trend. It's like pushing back the tide, right? Well, remember this, folks. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. So think about that. I know most of you haven't truly faced the effects of preventable disease, devastating disease, but I ask that all of you remember the lessons of my great Aunt Nancy, of polio, and what it did to her when she was just 4 years old. I guarantee you, if a vaccine had been invented that would have prevented that from happening, she would not have been screaming about her rights and her freedoms. She would have been first standing in line to get that vaccine. So I encourage all of you to protect each other, to value science, and to defend herd immunity as one of the greatest achievements of modern civilization. Because this isn't just about freedom, it's about survival. And not just the survival of the fittest, like me and my family who are all vaccinated, but in fact the survival of the entire community. Don't let foolishness or politics or uncertainty drag humanity backwards. Stop listening to the noisy minority and their misunderstood logic. Think it through. Ask questions. Remember the lessons written in the suffering of past generations. We stand at a crossroads. One path leads to health, progress, and continued survival. The other path, the one we are calling freedom, it's actually the beginning of a great die-off. Don't be part of the Darwin Award generation. Be part of the generation that remembered, adapted, and chose life. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how we all win. I'm Jason M. Garrett. Thank you for listening to this Dadogram. Now go out there and do the right thing. Thank you.